This thing is tough looking. Alright guys, so today we are using the stencil of the month for May of 2024. I wanted to use this, it's a cool looking Viking, but I wanted to make something that looks like it came right off of a Viking ship. I think we succeeded. This thing is super cool looking. Real quick, if you don't know, stencils of the month and templates of the month, our executive and our premium members get those for free. And I will put a link in the description below under memberships. I'll also put links in the description below for everything we use today. Now let's get started. For this sign, we used a piece of 16 by 16 redwood that we actually had left over from a table we made. And it was super easy to lay out. So all I did was put the stencil on the board and then measured to make sure I had the even amount of space all around it. So it was centered directly in the board. Then once that was done, I just used my black primer and gave it a good spray. And to be honest, I should have sprayed a little bit more because some of the lines were kind of fuzzy, but it worked with no problem. I only used 2 bits on this sign, and the first bit I used is the profile bit at 3/16 of an inch deep. Now this is pretty big. There is some fine points. So I was thinking about dropping it to 1/4 of an inch deep on my first cut and trying to kind of skip going around it again because I'm impatient and I just can't help it. However, I'm glad I didn't. Because of the tips of the horns on there and then down in the beard area, there's some pretty sharp points. So it would have been a lot harder to get those sharp points if I would have dropped it at 1/4 of an inch deep to begin with. Not to mention the fact that this redwood was pretty grainy. Now, this was a piece that we glued together for a table, so it's several 2x6s all put together to make one board. So as the boards separate, there's different grains, so it wasn't very consistent at all. One other thing to keep in mind is you can see as I'm going on the right side of that horn right there, I made my initial cut and then I worked my way back towards the line. With a board like this, it's a lot easier to just continue a cut even if you veer off the line, as long as you veer the right way into the black. Then you can always come back and feather it back in and make sure you get it back right where you want it. It just takes a little bit longer, but you end up with a much cleaner line than trying to get it all in one shot. One question we get asked a lot is how our lines are so straight, and a big trick to this is starting shallow, especially when it comes to like hardboards, but even on redwood it gets pretty grainy. So if you do your initial cut fairly shallow, maybe even shallower than 3/16 if you went to 1/8 of an inch, something like that, then it would be a lot easier to hold your line and you can always go back around and make a deeper cut. Real quick guys, we are in a campaign. We're trying to hit 100,000 subscribers this year. So if you could do us a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. We got a ton of really cool projects in the works and you guys won't want to miss them. Once my initial cut was done, then I took that same profile bit and I dropped it down to 1/4 of an inch deep. This is the step that I was trying to be lazy and impatient and avoid. But to be honest, it goes super fast. It really doesn't take very long at all. And especially down in the beard area, there's a few spots where there's just no way to get a 90-degree bit in there without damaging what I've already carved. So sometimes it's better just to listen to your dad and do it the way he suggests, even when you don't want to. The last bit I'm using is our 90-degree bit at 1/4 of an inch deep, and this is the one we use to do what we call our background or our cleanup. Basically, I'm going in and taking out all of the wood that's left inside the carving. This is my favorite part of carving, I think. I got a few. But it's kind of because all of the hard work is done getting your outline. Now you just get to go in and make some sawdust. One little tip, when you get into small areas, don't just drop it and drag it down because you can damage the carving you've already done. So take your time and just kind of drop it in, take it out, and then drop it in and take it out another spot till it's all gone. Make sure when you're done carving, you take a stiff bristle brush and you brush the crap out of that thing. That way there's not going to be anything left after you're done spraying and sanding, and no high spots. Now with the edge, I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do, so I went ahead and taped off the edge. That way I didn't spray it. There was no overspray on there. And then I sprayed it with our black primer and from several different angles, because when it comes to like the sharp points, you want to make sure that you don't miss any. And I didn't have to worry too much about overspraying because redwood just doesn't bleed. Once it dried, then I took the tape off, made sure there was no black on the edge itself, and I sanded it off with an 80 grit disc. Now I didn't use the random orbital on this one, mainly because I wanted it to be so rough looking, but looking back, I probably should have used it at least on the face, just to give it more of a shine. For the edge, we used our angle grinder with the Kutzall Extreme Coarse disc. Now, if you guys haven't used one of these before, it is a blast. My gosh, it makes a ton of sawdust and it just takes wood off like nobody's business. We've really gotten more into the power carving aspect, and man, it's a ton of fun. We really enjoy it, and it gives it such a cool look. For this look, I really didn't know what I was going to do. And let's be honest here, Dad. Dad was a little bit, like, unsure of how it would look. But I kind of had an idea of what I wanted it to look like. I wanted it almost to look like the one I did for Jack Carr last year. All I did was carve until I thought it looked rough and cool looking, and I'm pretty happy with how it came out. One little word of advice: if you do get into power carving and you're using this disc and the angle grinder, wear leather gloves, which I have on here, wear an apron, and wear a face mask, because my gosh, if this thing gets away from you, it will rip skin off a lot easier than it takes off wood. To get some of the lines that the disc left in the wood out, we used our Clean Spore sander. I'm not even sure what this thing is called, but it works really, really well when it comes to rough areas like this. And it just kind of softened it up a little tiny bit. Because the Extreme Coarse disc takes off so much wood, it leaves these really rough lines, and this does a good job of taking them all out. Then we put about 4 coats of our Rust-Oleum clear on here. And one thing about redwood is that when it doesn't have any clear on it, it can be kind of dull looking, but as soon as you put clear, man, that whole thing just pops, and it really shows the depth and the grain inside the power carving.
You guys, I love the way this edge came out. So well, it's not really an edge, it's just kind of me making sawdust until I thought it looked good. My whole goal for this thing was to make it kind of look handmade, and not with power tools, but with a rock and a knife. So I'm really stoked with how this thing came out, and I think it'll be a big seller. I think this thing looks freaking awesome. So as always, guys, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, you can shoot me an email, ryan@makeawoodsign.com. And remember, I will put links in the description for everything we use today. We'll see you guys on the next one.